he made at his pathetic little diner. That's why I had my bodyguards sabotage his speedboat in the first place. So he would need the money to fix it and not have enough. At the time I went to him as a concerned friend, and offered to loan him the money. He took it and I knew I had him right then and there. Ash and his friends gasped at hearing this. That's what Mo had borrowed the money for. He didn't even have the boat anymore. The thing was now resting at the bottom of the harbor after the thieves who stole Mo's money wrecked it in their futile attempt to escape from Ash. Mo just looked down in shame at being reminded of how foolish he had been taking money from Brutella. The old woman continued. I didn't know how much that old codger had saved up, so I hired some men to get jobs working for Mo and then steal any money he had at the restaurant so he couldn't pay me back with it. Again, everyone looked beyond shocked. Brutella had hired those men to get jobs working for Mo just so they could steal his money. Exclamation mark. Brutella shrugged. I was then going to dispose of those men once they delivered the money to me so I wouldn't have to pay them and to also make sure I had no loose ends laying around. However, I never counted on you brats stopping them and getting his money back. Nor did I imagine he would actually tell you about the money he owed me, leading to you four goody-goodies volunteering to help him at his restaurant, trying to earn enough money for him to pay me back. Once you started helping him out and his restaurant started getting more popular, I knew it would be trouble. Luckily, those three stooges. She pointed at Jesse, James and Meowth, who were glaring at her while looking nervously at the nearby police all at the same time. Crashed into my office, doing much damage in the process. I knew at first glance from their uniforms that they were from Team Rocket and used that to my own advantage. I told them that unless they worked for me and did everything I commanded of them, I would turn them into the police. I ordered them to sabotage Mo's diner, and vandalize it until he could no longer do business out of it. I thought then and there that I had won. However, you pests then decided to enter the Port Vista Beach competitions and win the events so you could give the prize money to Mo so he could pay me back. After the first of you three won your events and collected so much money, I knew that if that annoying boy and his Pikachu won the battle tournament it would be over for me and Mo would then have more than enough money to pay me back. That's why. She cackled and looked at Giselle with an evil glint in her eyes. She stepped in even closer to Giselle and said just loud enough for only Giselle and Ash to hear her, in almost a whisper. I decided to take his focus off of the competition and onto something else. I knew from the way the brat looked and talked to you that you undoubtedly meant much to him. That's why I hired some guys to kidnap you. I knew that once the annoying pest realized you were gone he would go looking for you and I had hoped that he would not make it back in time and miss the tournament, or not find you at all and be so lost in his despair he would forfeit. After all, I did tell those boys I hired to have some fun with their captive. That was where I messed up. Those horny little bastards couldn't wait to have their fun until they were far enough away from here and they ended up getting caught because of it. Oh well. I just hope they got to have at least a little fun with you, girl. She said with a nasty look on her face. Giselle looked stunned. Brutella was the reason she had been kidnapped. Her distaste for the old woman grew by leaps and bounds at that revelation. She felt Ash tense up beside her and she looked at him. The irises of his eyes were starting to turn a very light blue and she could feel the energy start to roll off of him. She instantly went into her kind and caring mode and pulled Ash into a tight hug. She grabbed his cheeks and gently turned his face to look at her. She began whispering to him while she tenderly stroked his cheek with one hand and ran her other hand through his hair. Ash. Sweetheart, it's okay. It's alright, sweetie, just calm down now. Everything is okay. Remember, I'm still here and they didn't do anything to me. She continued to whisper soothingly to him while she kissed his face in different places. Her magic charms worked and eventually Ash calmed down. Though he was still glaring hatred at Brutella. The old woman continued like nothing happened and now was looking at Ash as she rose her voice above a harsh whisper again. Once that plan failed, I knew that I couldn't take the chance of you winning the tournament. That's why I made Team Rocket kidnap the old man and then had one of them take his place as your opponent. However, I never figured that someone from Team Rocket would be so weak and lose to you, but still. Everything about the end result of the tournament is so messed up and confused by this point that none of my failed plans matter. The event coordinator is going to end up canceling the tournament and recall everything that happened during the event. You're not going to be able to keep the prize money, which means that Mo won't be able to pay me back. I'll take his restaurant in the end and still have my 5-star hotel up and running in no time. I'll be a millionaire and that worthless bum will have nothing. She crowed in triumph and cackled like mad at the end of her long-winded explanation. She stopped laughing and then sneered at Giselle. So sorry, princess, but it looks like my horrible tricks are going to pay off in the end after all. Giselle just remained silent for a little while and looked down at the ground, her hair overshadowing her face. Eventually she looked back up at Brutella and started laughing hard, confusing both Brutella and Ash. Giselle, what's so funny about any of this? Ash asked, completely lost. Giselle just pointed to the event coordinator. Ash and Brutella looked at the man's face and saw rage in his expression. He looked down at Brutella and spoke into the microphone. Care to tell myself and the audience about any of your other heinous crimes? Miss, he said with anger laced into his voice. Brutella looked around and saw the entire crowd glaring at her. Ash's friends, family and Mo, especially Mo, looked beyond outraged. While Officer Jenny and the other officers were making their way towards the old woman with stern glares on their faces. Brutella looked dumbfounded. What the, she began until she heard her voice being amplified and carried out across the beach by the microphone in the event coordinator's hand. It was a very powerful microphone that could pick up raised voices from at least 2 feet away. And Brutella was standing right next to the man. Her face contorted into one of complete rage as she whipped around and looked at Giselle. You little bitch. You tricked me. You knew that microphone was on. She accused, pointing her finger at Giselle. The girl in question just flipped her hair and tightened her grip on Ash. Maybe, she said with a smirk. Brutella growled and looked at her bodyguards. Get that little tramp, she ordered. Before her guards could even move, Ash stepped in front of Giselle and stared them down with murder in his eyes. You touch my girl, and I will rip you apart, he said menacingly. The bodyguards took one look at the boy, who seemed as though he could explode at any moment if anyone so much as grazed Giselle's skin, and felt a shiver run down their spines at the cold look in his eyes. They were still a little blue from Ash's anger moments before, which made him look even more menacing. They raised their hands up defensively and backed away. To hell with how young he was, the look in his eyes would terrify most anyone. Brutella looked outraged. What are you doing? He's just a child. She looked at Ash and then saw what her bodyguards did. He was now holding Giselle tightly in his arms, very protectively, and had a look in his eyes that promised unimaginable pain to anyone who laid a hand on her. After he nearly lost her to those monsters, he was now feeling very protective of her. Brutella slowly backed away just as the police grabbed a hold of her 2 bodyguards and cuffed them. Officer Jenny and a few other officers walked up to Brutella, who was now looking for any kind of escape route. She found none and just watched with fear in her eyes as the officers stopped in front of her. Officer Jenny pulled out a pair of handcuffs and nodded at 2 of the officers. They walked over and grabbed Brutella by each arm. She started squirming and screaming at them. Let me go. You have it all wrong. I didn't mean anything I said. Officer Jenny began cuffing Brutella as she called out the charges that she was being arrested for. Brutella Hagerson, you are hereby under arrest for several different acts of criminal activity, conspiracy. Assistant to 2 counts of vandalization, assistant to kidnapping. She didn't count the case of Giselle being kidnapped by the boys that Brutella paid off, since no one heard when Brutella leaned in close to Giselle and Ash and confessed to that crime, assistant to attempted rape, hiring out criminals to steal from another individual, plans of murder, harboring criminals of a well-known criminal organization, attempted assault of a minor, as well as several other smaller charges that will be recited to you by the district judge. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be held against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you do not have one, then one will be appointed to you. She finished speaking to Brutella and then lined up the woman with her 2 bodyguards. Officer Jenny then got in Brutella's terrified face. Just to let you know, no attorney you get will be enough to help you out of this mess. She whispered to the woman. Brutella gulped and looked down. By this time, Mo and Ash's other friends and family were now on the stage with him. Officer Jenny first walked up to the event coordinator. I'm very sorry for the disturbance today, sir. We will make sure that Brutella is prosecuted for her crimes. You may continue with what you were doing whenever you are ready. The man just nodded dumbly and thanked the woman. Yes, officer. Thank you, he said almost dazedly. The day's events having really gotten to him. While this was going on, Jesse, James and Meowth slowly started backing away from the stage. Let's get out of here, James whispered as they made it to the bottom of the stage. Jessie nodded her head. Great idea, James. I want to be as far away from these cops as possible. She whispered back. Just as they prepared to run up off the beach and into the city, Meowth stopped them. Wait a minute, guys, I got a great idea. The talking Pokémon said excitedly. What is it, Meowth? James asked curiously. Meowth smirked. You know how we still gotta fix Gyarados submarine. The 2 humans nodded. More like get a new one since the one other was totally destroyed, but yes, Meowth. And? Jessie asked impatiently. Let's stop by Brutella's office on da way out of town and break into her safe. We'll steal all da money in it and then call up da weapons department of Team Rocket, wire da money to em and get another one made for us. We'll be using money we stole so it won't go against our Team Rocket bank account. Meowth explained. Jessie and James looked at each other and nodded. That's a great plan, Meowth. Let's go, Jessie said. They then took off to go loot Brutella's safe and leave the city. Escaping the police's clutches yet again, hopefully getting a new submarine out of the deal and also draining any chance that Brutella could buy her way out of prison. Luckily for them, everyone up on the stage and everyone in the crowd was too preoccupied with what was currently happening to pay any attention to the retreating rockets. Officer Jenny walked up to Ash and his friends. Well, young man, it looks like my department is in debt to you kids yet again. Not only did you help us catch those criminals last week, you helped bring down a corrupt and twisted businesswoman. Thank you on behalf of the entire Port Vista Police Department. If you ever need anything, just ask, she said with a smile on her face as she shook their hands. Thanks, Officer Jenny, they all said together. She then walked over to Mo. Sir, I am so sorry for the trouble that this woman has caused you. She had absolutely no right to do anything she did, and I assure you, she will go to prison for these injustices. Most likely the judge will make her pay large fines as well for damages. No matter how much money she has now, I can all but guarantee you it won't be enough. Her restaurant will most likely be taken from her, and in order to pay for the damages she has caused you, you will most likely be given her restaurant as compensation, to either sell or keep, it will be your choice. I've seen cases like this before, so I'm pretty confident in what I'm telling you. Mo just shook his head in amazement. Thank you, Officer Jenny. This is just unbelievable, he said in disbelief. The female officer just smiled and shook her head. Don't thank me, sir. You deserve all of it for what you've been put through. If you want to thank anybody, thank the brave kids who did all of this. They're the real heroes here. Be expecting contact from my office concerning everything that is happening concerning this situation. We'll be getting papers to you soon. And suddenly Misty called out. Where did Team Rocket go? Officer Jenny, the other officers, Ash and the rest of his friends looked around but saw no sign of them. Jenny growled. Ag. They got away, she said angrily. The woman turned to another officer. We need to send out a warning to all officers in the city and tell them they need to be on the lookout for. She was suddenly interrupted by Ash. Officer Jenny. I'm sorry, but it won't work. She turned to Ash. What do you mean, won't work? We have to find them, she insisted. Ash just shook his head and sighed. Officer, believe me, I know, they do need to be found, but trust me, Those three are experts at disappearing from any kind of trouble whatsoever. Believe when I say that you will not find them right now. If there is one thing they're good at, it's hiding. Officer Jenny just sighed. Well, that really sucks. If those three criminals are members of Team Rocket, then they deserve to be in prison, she said indignantly. Ash nodded his head. And again, you're right. But trust me, if you send out a search party, it will just spread your resources to thin. Luckily or unluckily, I don't know which, those three always find me and my friends, so this won't be our last chance in taking them down, he assured her. Officer Jenny reluctantly agreed and stopped her officers from putting out a bolo. She then turned back to Ash. Please promise that you will call me at the department and tell me if and when those three ever get captured, all right? She asked him. Ash smiled at her. You got it, officer, he told her. She returned the smile before saying farewell to Mo, Professor Oak, Delia, the old man, the event coordinator, and then gave a salute to Ash and his friends before rallying her officers together, calling into the department about the incoming criminals over her radio, and then marched Brutella and her bodyguards away. The old woman looked back and gave Ash, his friends and Mo once last hateful glance before she and her bodyguards were led down the stage and off the beach, where they eventually disappeared from sight. Ash walked over to the old man who was supposed to be his opponent and who had also stood up for him. Excuse me, sir, he said politely. The man turned around and looked at Ash. Yes, young man, he asked kindly. Ash smiled at him. Thank you for coming back and telling everyone what happened. It really means a lot, and I'm truly sorry for what Team Rocket did to you. Ash apologized. The old man just waved his hand dismissively. Think nothing of it, young man. I was only too glad to help bring those criminals to justice. I only wish that Team Rocket would have been captured as well, he said with a frown. Ash just shook his head. It's like I told Officer Jenny, mister. Those three always seem to find me and my friends. Justice will catch up with them one of these days. The old man nodded. We can only hope. Ash stuck his hand out. I'm sorry I didn't really introduce myself earlier. My name's Ash, Ash Ketchum. The man shook Ash's hand. Very good to meet you, Ash. My name is John Eldritch. Ash stopped shaking the man's hand and said, It's great to meet you as well, John. You know, it really sucks that we didn't get to battle each other, he said sadly. John nodded. Yes, but who knows? We just might get another chance sometime, he said, trying to lift the boy's spirits. The event coordinator heard this and smiled. He walked up to them and spoke. You know, gentlemen, I may just be able to make that happen here and now. What do you say? He asked them. Ash looked confused. But the contest is over, sir. The man laughed. That may be true, but I think that I could add one more round to this contest so you both get a chance to battle each other. It's the least I can do for such an upstanding young man and friend to the Port Vista Police Department. What do you both say? The coordinator asked them. Ash instantly nodded his head. All right. I'm game, he said excitedly. John smiled. I sounds like a plan to me. The coordinator spoke into the microphone as he addressed the crowd. What do you say, folks? Would you like to see one last battle before we end the day? The crowd cheered loudly in a resounding yes. He smiled and looked at the two trainers. Well then, let's start this battle. XXXXXXXXX. The battle between Ash and John truly was exciting and action-packed. It was Pikachu versus John's Golbat. The entire battle was based largely on speed and accuracy of the attacks. Golbat was very fast on its wings and could launch fast energy-draining attacks like Leech Life, poison attacks like Poison Fang, aerial moves like Air Cutter, and confusion-inducing moves like Supersonic with deadly and accurate precision. The battle was intense, both opponents landing hits on the other at a fast and precise rate. However, the battle turned when Pikachu took off running for the back end of the stage, Golbat chasing after him with wing attack. Both Pokémon were battered and bruised, but Pikachu was used to such a thing from the murderous training he did. Pikachu stopped near one of the large metal supports that held the stage up and waited for Golbat to draw closer. John believed that Pikachu had merely run out of places to run and urged Golbat to fly in faster and hit Pikachu as hard as he could. Just before Golbat could hit Pikachu, he jumped up on top of the metal support, evading the bat and letting it instead smash its head into the pole. Pikachu then jumped down on top of the downed Pokémon and unleashed a strong thunderbolt on his opponent. In the end, Golbat fell unconscious to the strong electric currents passing through it. The event coordinator happily named Ash the true Port Vista Beach Battle Tournament victor after the match ended, causing Ash and Pikachu to jump around in joy with each other, while the crowd cheered loudly and his friends and family ran up onto the stage in order to congratulate him. John was not the least bit upset over losing and was only too glad to join in on congratulating Ash for his win. After the congratulations and announcements were done, the event coordinator came over to Ash and shook his hand. Congratulations again, Ash, and I hope you find success on your journey. I'm a busy man, but I'll be looking for you in the next Indigo conference if you plan on competing, he said kindly. Ash shook the man's hand right back. Thank you as well, sir. I appreciate it. You will definitely see me in the conference, Arceus willing. After that was done and the coordinator exited the stage, John walked up to Ash next. That was truly a fantastic battle, young man, and I wanted to congratulate you again. I know you are going to go far in this life with your Pokémon. Ash smiled and then shook John's hand. Thanks, John the First. Appreciate your faith in me. Take care of yourself. John nodded. I will, Ash, I will. Like that kind event coordinator said, I'll be cheering for you in the Indigo conference. Ash nodded. Thanks, John, I appreciate your support. After the old man left the stage, Ash looked up at Pikachu on his shoulder and held up the card that had the prize money on it. We did it, Pi. Great job today, I'm very proud of you. He praised his Pokémon. Pikachu just scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Pikachu Pi, he said, embarrassed. Delia suddenly grabbed Ash and began squashing him in a tight hug. Oh Ash, I'm so proud of you. You did such an amazing job. She praised her son at the same time she was choking the life out of him. Ash struggled in her grasp. Mom. Air. Can't. Breath. He gasped out. She released him eventually and he doubled over for air. Professor Oak came up and patted the boy on his back. That was truly an exciting match to watch, Ash. You were fantastic, you and Pikachu. He said with a smile. Yeah, Ash, you two were totally in sync throughout the whole tournament. Brock said, patting his friend on the shoulder. I never doubted you guys for a second, Ash. Misty said with a bright smile on her face. Ash just scratched the back of his head and chuckled. Thanks a lot, guys, I really do appreciate it. It was Pikachu that did everything and he was great. Still, I noticed some things that we needed to work on today and we are going to really focus on those things from now on during training. Ash admitted humbly. Professor Oak clasped his hands behind his back. And that is the mark of every great Pokémon trainer, Ash. Realizing the things you and your Pokémon need to work on while still enjoying the moment you won for yourselves. There is always room for improvement, but you still need to live for the here and now. He said wisely. Ash nodded and was then turned and pulled into a tight, but not Delia tight, hug by Giselle. That was amazing, Ash, I'm so happy for you and Pikachu. She said as she hugged him tighter. Ash just grinned and hugged her back. Thanks, Giselle, I really appreciate it. She separated herself from him and smiled brightly. He returned it and then walked over to Mo. He held out the card that had the prize money on it and handed it over to the old man. Here you go, Mo. Your prize money is promised. Ash said, smiling. Brock, Misty and Giselle both did the same thing and handed the wide-eyed man their own cards that held the prize they had won. Mo took them with shaking hands and looked from the cards to the kids in front of him. But Brutella has been arrested and is undoubtedly going to prison. I have no need to pay her back now, which means I don't need all of this money. Ash just shook his head at Mo and pushed the cards closer to him. That may be true, Mo, but still, you need repairs for your restaurant and this money will help. Plus, if what Officer Jenny said is true, then you will probably end up getting Brutella's restaurant as payment for damages. You can use all of this money to put towards your dream of sailing the world. he explained. The old man just looked at Ash and the other kids before getting a little teary-eyed and nodding his head. I can't even begin to express how grateful I am for this. Thank you. All of you just. Thank you. He repeated over and over again. No problem, Mo. I told you that we would help you. Ash said simply. Ash's friends nodded in agreement. Mo wiped his eyes, smiled at all of them and then said enthusiastically. Well, I believe this calls for a celebration. Let's all head back to the restaurant and make ourselves a feast with whatever is still left of the kitchen. Ash, Misty, Giselle and Professor Oak agreed immediately to the idea, while Delia and Brock looked excited as both said at the same time. I'll help. They looked at each other and laughed. Delia turned to Brock. How about we both help? She suggested. Brock nodded. Works for me. He agreed. With that decided, Ash, his friends, family and Mo all headed back to the diner for an evening of celebration. XXXXXXXXXXXX. The next day rolled around and we now find Ash and his friends standing near the bus station, located in the heart of the city. Delia and Professor Oak stood with them waiting for the bus that would take them back to Pallet Town. The previous night's festivities had been very enjoyable, everyone talking, laughing and getting to know each other better during the course of the evening while enjoying Delia and Brock's combined cooking. As luck would have it, Mo and Professor Oak both hit it off like two old friends and spent the entire night conversing about topics that predated the time of any of the other people in the room besides those two. The night was also rather embarrassing for Ash as his mother took it upon herself to tell several humiliating stories about him as a baby to all of his friends. Which lead to Brock, Misty and Pikachu laughing like crazy, Ash accusing Pikachu of being a traitor and then sinking down in his seat from the embarrassment, and Giselle to play the role of the kind and caring girlfriend and work on coaxing him out of his track suite. Which he had retreated into like a Squirtle. Anyone who saw Giselle trying so hard to help alleviate Ash's embarrassment could never question her affection for him since the whole time she was having to stifle down her own giggles and bursts of laughter from the stories Delia was telling. One such story that everyone nearly passed out from laughter from was when Delia told the story of a 3-year-old Ash getting a bath in the tub from her one day. He for some reason looked outside through the bathroom window and upon seeing what he thought was a, in his words, flamey bird Pokémon, ended up jumping from the tub, running out of the bathroom and dashing outside as fast as his little toddler legs could carry him. Covered in soap and still as naked as a Pokecity strip girl. Delia then went on to tell how she had chased him around the neighborhood, demanding for him to stop and him only doing so when he ran through the Oak family's backyard and crashed into an 11-year-old Daisy Oak, who was helping her mother Amelia hang some clothes out on the line. Ash turned as red as a Charizard's flamethrower upon this story being told. Brock managed to gasp out in between his bouts of laughter, "Wow, Ash. I heard you had a crush on Daisy, but man, you started working fast, huh?" He joked. This was of course followed by another wild bout of laughter from everyone involved. Besides Ash of course, who looked like he would welcome the presence of even a Darkrai right now if it shifted the attention from himself. Even Giselle couldn't keep her giggles down upon hearing the "Nudie Ash" story. So needless to say, the night was very fun and eventful for everyone. Well, almost everyone, unless your name was Ash Ketchum. Unfortunately, Professor Oak had to return to the lab and his research since Daisy had to get back to Viridian City in a few days for more training with the Viridian nurse Joy, and Amelia couldn't handle the stress of the lab by herself. Obviously, since Delia had come with the professor, she had to leave and go back with him as well. So here they all were, waiting by the bus station. Ash's friends had already said their goodbyes and now it was just Ash who needed to say farewell. After being crushed to death by his mother in a tight hug, her telling him how proud she was of him and him promising that he would be safe and not get involved with any more bad business like he did with Brutella, yeah right. And Delia assuring he would remember to change his you-know-whats, he finally separated from her and walked over to the professor. Well, Professor, I guess I'll talk to you later on. Thanks again for bringing my Pokémon to me. Ash said gratefully. Professor Oak smiled and patted Ash's shoulder. Anytime, Ash, I was happy to do it. You just stay safe and keep training to be the best. The professor said with a smile. Ash returned the smile and then asked, Professor, what are we going to do about the water space issue back at the lab? With all of the Gyarados I have now and not to mention the other 3 water Pokémon I have, space is really going to be an issue. The kind old professor just chuckled and shook his head. Actually, Ash, that problem has been solved. Ash looked confused. What do you mean, Professor? Well, Ash, Oak began. I had a feeling that your Pokémon would run into a space issue with the pond. Especially after all of those Gyarados you captured. So, your Pokémon and I undertook a little project. Ash looked very interested. What project? The professor grinned before he started explaining. Well, when I saw that your Pokémon were going to become limited to the area of how much water they had available to them, especially your water Pokémon, I enlisted the help of your Dragonite while she was with me to perform a task. You see, Ash, the forests that are located around the ranch are all very wet, which means that underground water sources are very plentiful. Approximately 200 yards to the east of the pond that your Pokémon use now is a very large clearing in the forest. This clearing has several underground streams that join together just on the outside of it. Or at least, it would if they were not blocked off and prevented from joining together by large boulders underground that hold the water back. Professor Oak paused to make sure Ash was following along. I had Dragonite, since she is so large and strong, go into this clearing and use her colossal strength to clear out many of the trees and other foliage surrounding it, expanding the clearing to over 100 yards long and wide. She then dug out massive portions of the earth and created a large basin that expands nearly the entire newly extended clearing and is around 100 feet deep. Very deep, yes, but easy for her to get in and out of since she is so large and can also fly. Anyway, after she did this, several of your other Pokémon were lowered down into the basin by Dragonite and then dug a tunnel into one of its sides, eventually connecting it with the pond that your Pokémon use now that's just outside of the forest. Dragonite then smashed the boulders that kept the underground streams from joining together, and when she did, the entire 100 yards long and wide, 100-foot deep basin, filled completely up with water, creating a small lake in the extended clearing. He paused for effect. So essentially, Ash, your Pokémon, specifically your water Pokémon, now has 2 bodies of water they can call their own. They now have plenty of space and can freely switch between whichever body of water they want to by simply swimming through the underground tunnel that connects the 2. The width of the tunnel is around, I would say, 80 feet down and 50 feet across. They couldn't go upwards when they were deepening the tunnel since they would have busted through to the surface if they would have. Your Pokémon were also thinking ahead when they constructed the tunnel, Ash. They reinforced the walls and ceiling with many large stones and timber from the trees Dragonite cut down and placed them the entire length of the tunnel, assuring it won't cave in. Your coaches, Machamp, Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan and several other ground-type Pokémon that your Pokémon are friends with also helped out, which sped the process up dramatically. In fact, if your Pokémon wouldn't have had so much help, they would have never been able to dig out that massive tunnel in such short a time. The lake is extremely deep at 100 feet, so all of your more shallow water Pokémon will most likely stay towards the surface and only venture down so far. Your Gyarados, however, will most likely dive down very deep since they are accustomed to such depths from their time in the ocean. Anyway, I'm getting off track again. In short, Ash, the water space issue is now solved, Professor Oak said cheerfully. By the time the professor finished, Ash was gaping. He finally found his voice and sputtered out. Professor Oak, that is just. You all did that just for me? He asked in amazement. Oak just nodded and smiled. That's right, Ash. We can't have your Pokémon being uncomfortable at their new home now, can we? Ash just shook his head in disbelief and then stepped forward and hugged the professor. Thank you so much for doing that, Professor. I really appreciate it, he said gratefully. The old man just chuckled and hugged his student in return. You are most welcome, M-boy, you are most welcome. Ash stepped back and then smiled brightly. You're the best, Professor. Oak chuckled again. Thank you, Ash. It's always good to hear that the ones you care for have such a high view of you. They were suddenly interrupted by the arrival of the bus. Professor turned back to Ash and his friends. Well, you four, take care of yourselves and keep shooting for your goals, he said in farewell. Ash nodded. You got it, Professor. I'll talk to you later. Ash hugged his mother again and bid her farewell. You take care of yourself, Ash. Don't be too reckless, understand? His mother all but sobbed. Ash sweat dropped and nodded his head, gently releasing himself from his mother. You got it, Mom, I promise. I'll see you later on, okay? I love you. She wiped her eyes and nodded. I love you too, honey. She looked at Giselle. Take care of my baby, Giselle. The girl smiled and walked up to Ash. She wrapped her arm around his and pulled him closer. Don't worry, Delia. I'll make sure Ash stays safe and well behaved, she said, giving Ash a pointed look, which he just chuckled nervously at. Delia smiled and sniffed. Thank you so much, dear. I really appreciate it. After the goodbyes were finished, Delia and Professor Oak stepped onto the bus and then Ash and his friends waved to the two adults as the bus slowly took off down the road, further into the city and eventually disappeared out of sight. Once they had finished watching the bus make its final turn around one of the buildings, they all headed back to Moe's Diner. They were intent on just spending the day relaxing after the previous day's excitement. Well, all except for Ash, who would only think about relaxing after he and his Pokémon had trained for the day. Once they had made it back and Ash had finished getting ready for training, he walked back out into main dining room and saw Misty, Brock and Mo taking a break from what they had been doing at one of the tables. They had been busy cleaning up the mess in the restaurant that Team Rocket had caused and were now enjoying some sandwiches that Brock had made. Hey Ash. Want a sandwich? Misty asked. Ash shook his head. No thanks, Misty, I'm heading out to train with my Pokémon. She just groaned. How can you think of training after the day we had yesterday? Can't you relax even one day? She asked exasperatedly. Ash chuckled. Future Pokémon champions don't rest often, Misty. We have to get stronger. Right, Pi? He asked Pikachu, who was on his shoulder. Pikachu looked down at his trainer, nodded his head and said with passion and fire in his voice. Pikachu. Ash smirked. See? He said smugly. Misty just shook her head. Crazy. She mumbled. Ash suddenly looked confused. Hey guys, where's Giselle? His friends and Mo looked confused as well. I don't know, Ash, I haven't seen her. Brock said. What do you mean you haven't seen her? Ash said, starting to get worried as his stomach twisted in a knot. Ever since yesterday's horrible experience of Giselle being kidnapped, Ash not knowing where she was scared him. I'm right here, guys. They all turned their heads and saw Giselle coming down the stairs from the second floor living quarters. She was dressed in a blue sports bra, black biker shorts, black cross trainers and had her hair pulled up. Ash sighed in relief. There you are, Giselle, I'm glad you're okay. Giselle looked confused. Why wouldn't I be? Ash looked down. After yesterday I keep thinking that you're going to come up missing again and... He trailed off, unable to finish. Giselle walked up to him and gave him a warm hug. I'm okay, Ash. I'm not going anywhere, I promise, she said softly to him. He smiled back at her and then she got a fiery look in her eyes. Now waitia say we go get sweaty, she said excitedly. Ash returned her fiery look with his own. Let's do it. The two then bid goodbye to their friends and took off out the door of the restaurant and made their way towards the beach. Brock just stared after them and shook his head amusedly. Those two are something else, he said with humor in his voice. Misty nodded. Better her doing that suicidal training with him than me, that's for sure, she said, crossing her arms. Mo stood up from his chair. Well, if those two are gonna go and work hard, then what do you say we do as well? This place has a lot more cleanup we have to do yet. Brock and Misty agreed and then they all went back to work cleaning up the restaurant. All in all, the day was looking very promising and a far cry better than the last had. XXXXXXXXXXXX. Time skip. 1 week later. A whole week had passed since the day of the tournament and other beach competitions and much had happened. Ash and his friends had spent their time helping Mo clean the restaurant, explore the city, visit the beach, and if you were Ash, Giselle and their Pokémon, train themselves into the ground. Of course, Ash and Giselle had quite a few romantic outings together during the course of the week in between everything else they did. Yet again, even though they were still kids, they both enjoyed the same sort of romantic activities that older couples did. They would stroll on the beach late at night, have lunch and sometimes even supper on beach, and they would even have nights out together in the city. On these romantic outings together it was always just them. Pikachu would always elect to stay behind at the diner with Brock, Misty, Mo and the other Pokémon so he could give his trainer time with his partner. In the last week Mo had also came into many good fortunes. He used the prize money that Ash and his friends had given him to have his restaurant repaired. It was now as good as new. Brutella's trial had also come and gone, and it was safe to say that the city of Port Vista threw the book at her, so to speak. All of her crimes had culminated into a life sentence with no chance of parole. Her bodyguards had received a strict sentence as well and wouldn't be expecting to see the light of day any in that lifetime. Officer Jenny had also been correct when she told Mo that he would most likely be awarded Brutella's restaurant for the damages she had caused him if the case became apparent that she didn't have enough money to pay him outright. Funny enough, and as luck would have it for Mo, not for Brutella, all of the money she had been saving in a large safe inside her office had been completely ransacked and every last credit stolen, no clues at all to who did it. Brutella was of course outraged at hearing this and was also struck like a train when the judge ordered ownership of her restaurant to pass into Mo's hands as an alternate form of payment. Ironic, huh? Safe to say, her spirits were thoroughly broken as she was hauled out of the courtroom after her trial was over. Ash and his friends had a good idea of exactly who had stolen from Brutella, but they decided not to say anything. She deserved it, and for once, Team Rocket did something that actually helped instead of hindered them. And so, Mo was named the new owner of Brutella's Better Than Yours restaurant. Surprisingly enough, however, he didn't keep the restaurant and instead decided to sell the establishment to a group of lawyers that was looking to open a new firm. Ironically enough, the practice of law that the lawyers who bought Brutella's restaurant specialized in was helping those who had been taken advantage of financially like Mo, from those who would try to swindle and take advantage of them using the money favors as leverage, like Brutella. Mo then used the money from Brutella's sold restaurant to buy himself a large and luxurious cruise boat. Something that Ash and his friends were very happy that Mo did. Over the last week, Mo had also been teaching Ash how to drive and take care of his new boat. Ash at first was a little leery of handling such an expensive and nice boat, but Mo had insisted. He told Ash that it was the least he could for the help that they had given him. Plus, he said that learning how to drive, operate and maintain a boat was a good idea when on a journey like Ash was, when you never knew what you may encounter and have to do. Ash agreed with the logic, which led to he and his friends sailing with Mo every day. For Ash's friends it was luxury, but for him it was just another intense, albeit exciting, form of training, since sailing was not the easiest thing in the world to do. Especially with all of the different sea and boat terms he had to learn. Mo also had drilled Ash on navigation when out at sea, which was hard but also exciting. The most surprising thing, however, was Mo's decision to also sell his own restaurant and fund his around-the-world sailing trip with the money from it. Ash and his friends were initially shocked by this but were ultimately very happy that Mo was finally following his dream. Mo's Diner had successfully sold to a group of people called the Pokémon Coast Defenders. They were an outfit of people who patrolled the beaches and waters of Port Vista with their own water Pokémon and helped to protect people and Pokémon alike from any kind of danger they may face while in, or near the water. They were going to renovate Mo's Diner into their base of operations, something that Mo, as well as Ash and friends, were very happy to hear. The kids now stood on a dock in the Port Vista harbor. Mo had just finished loading up his boat and was preparing to head out on the start of his round-the-world journey. The old man finished with his final preparations and then walked over to Ash and his friends. He smiled at them and placed his hands on his hips. Well, young ones, I guess this is it. Our time together now comes to an end by the shores of the sea. He said philosophically. Ash smiled sadly. Yeah, Mo, I guess so. Thanks for taking us in and everything else you did for us. Especially teaching me about boats and how to drive one, that was great. Yeah, and thanks for taking us out on the boat as well, Mo, that was so much fun. Giselle exclaimed happily. We're gonna miss you, Mo. Have fun out there on the sea and stay safe. Misty said. And don't forget those recipes I showed you. Brock reminded the old man. Mo nodded and then shook hands with each of the kids before he stepped onto the boat. He revved up the motor and then began slowly pulling away from the docks. You kids take care of yourself now, and Ash. Make sure you make it to and win the Indigo Conference. I'll find some way to watch it. If your journey ends up taking you around the world, maybe we'll meet up again someday. Mo yelled back to them. You got it, Mo, take care. Ash called back. The old man waved to them as his boat exiting the harbor and entered the open sea. Ash and his friends kept waving to him until eventually, his boat was only a speck on the horizon. Ash turned back to his friends. Well guys, it's still early, so what do you say we start heading out for Hutber Port so we can enjoy that stay at the hotel? I won a free weekend in the tournament. Sounds good to me. Giselle said in her usual happy and cheerful way. Let's do it. Misty said excitedly. Yeah, I'm pretty anxious to stay at this supposed luxury hotel. Brock added. Ash zipped around so fast that Pikachu nearly fell off his shoulder. Then let's head out. And with said, Ash and his friends set out from Port Vista with their sights set on Hutber Port and the many new adventures they were sure to come across along the way. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Time skip. One day later. We find our young heroes traveling down a long coastal road, traveling towards their next destination, the large and sprawling coastal city of Hutber Port. Only trumped in size by Port Vista. As they continued on their way, they finally began seeing the large skyscrapers that made up the city a little ways away in the distance. Giselle pointed ahead. Look guys. We're almost there, she said excitedly. Ash nodded and picked up his pace a little bit. I know, and I can't wait to see what the hotel we're staying at is like. He said anxiously. Misty caught up with Ash and Giselle. Well, what are you guys waiting for? Last one, there is a rotten poke egg, she said as she took off running. Ash shared a look with Giselle and then took off running as fast as he could. She sped off a few seconds later after them. Brock held his hand out. Wait. Guys, so much for a relaxing walk, he said as he took off after his friends. Not 10 minutes later, Ash and his friends entered the city, sweaty and breathing slightly hard but happy to finally have arrived at their destination. Victory is good, Ash said smugly as he placed his hands behind his head and leaned back a little. He had been the first one into the city, winning their little race. Giselle was second in. Haha, yeah, that's right, mister, enjoy it while you can. You won't win next time, she said while fixing her hair. I almost had you, Giselle. If it wouldn't have been for that stupid rock in the road, I would have beat you, Misty said as she caught up and stood next to Giselle. Giselle snorted and crossed her arms. Excuses, Misty. So unbecoming for someone to not just admit they lost, she chided. Misty huffed and turned away. Brock finally came puffing in behind the others. Don't worry, guys. I'm fine, just in pain here, he puffed out as he placed his hands on his knees. Ash just rolled his eyes and took in the city before him. Wow, what a city, he said impressed. The city itself was very big indeed and expanded a long ways down the coast. It also stretched quite a ways inland. There were several different buildings and structures all across the city, all ranging in several different shapes and sizes. From large skyscrapers, to smaller apartment-looking complexes and several smaller business buildings. The entire look of the city was finished off with the beautiful view of the ocean to the city's front. It's almost as big as Port Vista was, Giselle said looking around. I'm just glad it's near the ocean, Misty said with a happy sigh as she breathed in the salt air. Brock walked up to them. What do you guys say about heading out to the Pokémon Center before trying to find the hotel we're staying at? He asked. Ash nodded. Good idea, Brock. Let's go. Ash said as he walked onto one of the busy streets, flanked by his friends, and started making his way through the city. XXXXXXXX. After Ash and his friends had stopped by the Pokémon Center and had their Pokémon checked up, they left and made their way in the direction of the Watercrown Hotel, which was where they were staying. They had needed directions to get there, and luckily, Nurse Joy was nice enough to supply them with the exact route they needed to take in order to get there. They were currently walking down a street that was next to the ocean and within seeing distance of the famous Hutber coral reefs. Misty was starry-eyed as she gazed out over the ocean and had a very calm and serene look on her face. Man, Misty, you really love the ocean. Ash noticed. Misty sighed contentedly. Yeah, I do. Ever since I was little and my sisters would bring me to the beach, I've been addicted. Truth be told, the ocean is probably what got me so obsessed with water-type Pokémon in the first place. Just like the sea itself, water types are so unique and beautiful. Even when battling, water Pokémon look so graceful and majestic looking. She sighed happily again. Ash smiled and looked out over the ocean. He came to a stop and just watched the waves lap up against the wall of the road they were on top of. You know, you're right, Misty. She looked confused. What do you mean, Ash? She asked her friend. He closed his eyes and breathed in the air around him before replying. What you said about water Pokémon being so special and unique. They really are just that. Even though all Pokémon are special and amazing in their own right, water Pokémon have natures that are just like the tides themselves. Water types can ebb and flow with the currents of life and can adjust and overcome any adversity that comes their way, just like the sea can endure and wash away any kind of impurity that touches it. Don't ever feel weird or ashamed because of your strong passion for water Pokémon, Misty. It's a great thing, and water types are definitely worth the time and focus it takes to observe and understand them better. Ash trailed off and stared off into the horizon. Misty watched him with wide eyes and felt amazement as she gazed at him. The way he spoke about water Pokémon and completely condoned and understood her obsession with them. His understanding of just how amazing they truly were, and the way he was able to summarize exactly how she felt about them in just that simple speech. She sighed. Giselle is so lucky. She thought to herself. Ash is so different. But not in a bad way. He's so understanding and compassionate towards other people's dreams and fascinations. He's always so willing to help others when they need it and is so dedicated to his own dream, and not to mention Pokémon. When I look at him, I just. Why are my feelings towards Ash so complex, and why does he make me feel so frazzled? Brock is also my friend and he's a guy just like Ash, but it's as simple as breathing with him. He's like the brother I've never had. But Ash. I keep getting these strong feelings with each passing day I'm around him, and they just keep getting stronger. I just hope Giselle realizes how fortunate she is. Who knows? Maybe if things don't work out between them, I can. Misty was suddenly broke from her thoughts by Giselle yelling out, "Hey, what's that?" Ash turned his head and looked over at his girlfriend. What's what, Giselle? He said, confused. She pointed out towards the ocean, and Ash, Misty and Brock all looked at what she was pointing at. Floating in the water some yards away from them was what looked like a small, light blue Pokémon. It looked as though it was struggling to stay afloat and was desperately trying to get towards the shore. Misty's eyes widened when she realized what the Pokémon was. Ash must have realized what it was as well, because they both called out at the same time, "It's a Horsey." Misty took no time and instantly pulled out a Pokeball. Goldeen, help that Horsey! She yelled as she threw her Pokeball. It opened up and Goldeen appeared in a flash of light. Goldeen, Goldeen, she said as she hit the water and started swimming towards Horsey. She reached the struggling Pokémon and started talking to it. Horsey was either too tired to resist or understood what Goldeen was trying to do, because it let her grab a hold of it with her two front fins and then carry it to the shore. Paddling as fast as she could with her back tail fin. They finally reached the wall of the high road and Misty bent over the side. She carefully scooped Horsey out of Goldeen's grip and then thanked her Pokémon before returning it. She carried Horsey over to the side of the road and sat it down while the other three, plus Pikachu, crowded around Misty and the injured Pokémon. Misty had worry in her eyes and was desperately trying to figure out what was wrong with the small Pokémon. It was breathing shallowly and had a couple bruises on its body. The Pokémon looked up at her and she could see that one of its eyes were black and blue. Horsey. It said weakly. What do we do? Misty said frantically. Ash gently nudged in beside her and looked Horsey over. I don't think it's too bad, Misty. It looks like Horsey was in a fight and got beat up pretty bad. I think it's just sore and very exhausted, he said as took off his pack and reached into the medical supplies pouch of his bag. He pulled out a super potion and looked at Misty. Will you please cradle its head while I spray it with this? He asked. Misty nodded and held up Horsey's head while Ash sprayed the potion onto the injured Pokémon. As soon as the medicine made contact with Horsey's raw skin, the Pokémon flinched in pain and cried out, but eventually Ash had addressed every major wound and finished the treatment. Horsey stopped struggling and felt the healing and soothing effects of the medicine take hold. Its wounds slowly closed up and eventually it looked fine, no worse for the wear except for its black eye. Ash didn't want to get any of the potion in Horsey's eye, so he couldn't do anything about the swollen eye, unfortunately. He reached back into his pack and pulled out an Oran berry. Here, Misty, feed this to Horsey, it'll restore its strength. Misty took the berry and put it near Horsey's mouth. The Pokémon looked up at her warily and she just smiled down at it warmly. Please eat this berry, Horsey, I promise it will make you feel better, she said kindly. Horsey hesitated a few seconds but eventually ate the berry. A few moments later it felt its energy return to it and felt 1,000,000 times better. It slowly sat up in Misty's arms a little more and looked around. It looked up at Misty after a few seconds and smiled at her. Horsey. It said happily as it reached up and rubbed its nose against her cheek. Misty laughed and held the Pokémon closer. You're welcome, Horsey. But it wasn't all me, Ash was the one that healed you, she said, pointing at Ash. Horsey looked at Ash and gave him an eye smile. Horsey. It said gratefully. Ash chuckled and bent down. He rubbed Horsey's snout and smiled. No need to thank me, Horsey, I was glad to help. Is he going to be okay now? Giselle asked, concerned. Ash nodded. He should be now. He just needed a good potion and an energy restorer. What do you think, Brock? Ash asked his squinty-eyed friend. Brock knelt down and examined Horsey. I think it'll be fine now, Ash. You did good, he praised. Misty said. Everyone else said, confused. Misty repeated herself. I said, Horsey is a male. How do you know? Giselle asked curiously. Male Horsey are a lighter shade of blue than females are, she stated matter-of-factly. Learn something new every day, huh? Giselle said with a smile. Ash looked at Horsey and asked a question that was on everyone's minds. Horsey. What happened to you? How did you get so beat up? Horsey's attitude instantly changed and he started looking towards the ocean nervously while calling his name. Horsey, Horsey, he said frantically. None of them understood what Horsey was trying to get across to them as he continued pointing in the direction of the ocean with his snout. What do you think he's trying to tell us? Giselle asked. Ash shook his head. I don't know. He probably just got into a fight with another Pokémon deeper out in the sea. He looked at Misty. Come on, Misty, we need to get to the hotel, see if Horsey wants to come along, he told her. Misty nodded and looked down at Horsey. You want to come along with us for now, Horsey? She asked the small Pokémon. Horsey nodded its head vigorously. Horsey. It agreed enthusiastically. Misty smiled and picked Horsey up. She cradled him in her arms and looked at her friends. I'm ready, she said. Ash nodded. Then let's head out. The kids then set out for their destination. XXXXXXXXX. After walking down the street that bordered the sea for about 10 minutes, Ash and the others finally came upon the site of a large no scratch that massive building sitting on a very large portion of property that overlooked the beach. Actually, From where the towering structure was sitting, it was positioned perfectly in line with the Hutber coral reefs. In fact, some ways out in the water in front of where the large building was facing, was a large construction site set up over top of the water. Something definitely was being built over there, but they couldn't tell what. The large building itself, for lack of a better word, looked awe-inspiring and had the look of a very fancy and well-architectured piece of art. The entire building was painted a sea blue and had intricate designs painted onto its surface all the way around. It was too tall for words and had a large and well-guarded gate wrapped around the entire length of the property. On the very front of the hotel was the name, Watercrown Hotel, spelled out in big golden letters. Ash and his friends stared slack-jawed at the sight as they walked up to the hotel. As they came closer to the entrance of the gate, two guards stopped them. Are you here to see about staying at the Watercrown Hotel, or do you happen to already have a reservation? One of the security guards asked nicely. Ash decided to do the talking. Yes sir, we are actually. My friends and I are here to claim a free stay that I won in a tournament. He said politely. The guard nodded and stepped inside the guard shack. He pressed a button and the ornate gates swung open. Enjoy your stay then and have a great day. The guard bid them with a wave. Ash and his friends bid him goodbye as well and then walked through the gates. As soon as they stepped through, they found themselves staring at the most well-kept and taken care of lawn garden they had ever seen. Leading to the doors of the hotel was a cobblestone path lane before their feet. Palm trees bordered each side of the path, and on either side of the massive lawn was a large assortment of shrubbery, flowers and trees, both local and exotic looking, spread all around the grounds. There were also many different lawn ornaments and statues set up in certain places everywhere they looked. Ranging from statues of water Pokémon, fountains that had benches set up near them, and even small courtyards that were set up here and there that were filled with nothing but flowers and statues so guests could leisurely walk through them and observe the splendid decor. Wow! Amazing! Giselle said in awe as she looked around. No kidding. Ash agreed. They continued down the cobblestone path until they reached the intricate doors of the hotel. Before Ash could grab the door handle, the doors suddenly opened up and revealed two employees dressed in sea blue hotel outfits, holding the doors open for them. Ash and his friends walked in through the door and stepped into the lobby. Their breaths were taken away as they took in the sight of the almost royal-looking lobby. The entire theme was that of a sea theme, or more of a royal sea theme, with beautiful sculptures and decorations set up all over the huge lobby. Artwork was on nearly every wall, and in the center of the lobby was a huge golden fountain that had several small statues of water Pokémon around its base. Goldeen, Staryu, Tentacool and Poliwhirl were just a few of the statues surrounding the inside of the fountain, with water spouts coming from their mouths. At the very top of the fountain, resting atop the utmost point like a beacon, was a royal-looking crown that was a deep blue in color and had several small sapphires around the headband of it. Benches that had seashells engraved into them were set up around the fountain, and in the very front of the lobby was a large concierge desk that had a very well-dressed and proper-looking man behind it. This place is just. Misty began. Incredible. Brock finished. Ash walked up to the desk and took in the man's appearance. He had ruffled brown hair and wore a black suit with a white tie. The man looked up from the computer he was typing on and addressed Ash and his friends in a very proper voice. Welcome to the Watercrown Hotel, where luxury and relaxation is an inevitable experience. How may I help you? Ash stepped closer to the desk and greeted the man. Thank you, sir. My name is Ash Ketchum and these are my friends. I am here to claim the week's free stay that I won in the Port Vista Beach Battle Tournament. He said politely. The desk clerk nodded his head and turned his attention back to the computer. He typed in a few keys and after a few minutes of searching he looked back up at Ash and smiled. Ah, here you are. Ash Ketchum. It says that you were indeed the victor of the Port Vista Beach Battle Tournament and won a free week's stay here at our wonderful hotel with the option of 3 others joining you as your guests. I actually remember this promotion we had going. Congratulations on your victory, young man. He praised. Ash nodded. Thank you, sir, I appreciate it. The man finished typing on the computer and then looked back at Ash. Are you four the only ones checking in? Yes, sir. Ash confirmed. The man nodded. And do you have any luggage you would like to have carried up to your suites? Ash shook his head. Only the packs we are carrying, sir. My friends and I are traveling and are just here for our free stay. The concierge nodded again and then reached below the desk. He brought out 4 key cards and handed them over to Ash, who handed one to each of his friends in turn. These are the cards to get into your room, sir. You are on the very top floor in 2 of our finest executive suites. The rooms overlook the ocean and have an even better view of the coral reefs. Each room has 2 bedrooms, a living room combined with a full kitchen, and both rooms also come equipped with a full-size jacuzzi and wraparound balcony that gives you a splendid view of the ocean. Should you need anything, please feel free to call room service, and complimentary breakfast is served every day from 7 o'clock to 9 a.m. We also have a pamphlet in each room that will give you a complete rundown on every activity we offer here at Watercrown. The pool is located out back, which you need your key card to have access to, and a mini bar is also set up inside of the pool area. I recommend taking a tour of our expansive gardens located on the grounds if you want a relaxing stroll, and perhaps even a visit to our on-site hot springs for a day of complete relaxation if that interests you. There are many more commodities we offer here at Watercrown, and you can read all about them in the aforementioned pamphlets. Your checkout time is next Friday at 10 a.m. and I hope you have a great stay. Ash smiled and thanked the man. Before they walked away, the desk clerk stopped them again. And by the way, Mr. Ketchum. The owner of the hotel made it clear that she wanted to meet the winner of the contest when they finally arrived here. If you wouldn't mind stopping by her office later on at noon so she may congratulate you personally, I'm sure she would be very appreciative. Her office is on a separate floor that only employees and she herself can access from the elevator. If you come back down here to the lobby at noon, then we can provide you with one of the staff so they can take you up to her office. Would you mind? I know this may be an inconvenience and I do apologize for it. Your friends are more than welcome to accompany you if that helps at all. Ash looked at his friends and they merely shrugged. I don't mind going, Ash. Giselle said. Misty and Brock said the same. Ash turned back to the man and nodded. Yeah, sure, we'll go see her. He said simply. The desk clerk bowed his head. Thank you so much. I shall let her know and see you all again soon. He said happily. After that, Ash and the others walked over to the elevators and took them to the topmost floor. After exiting the elevator, they walked down the long hallway that had several large and fancy-looking doors on either side of them. They finally arrived at their door numbers, and after checking their key cards for confirmation that they were at the right rooms, they unlocked their doors and stepped inside. Brock and Ash checking out their room and the girls checking out their own. Ash's eyes bugged out as he took in the room. Just like the rest of the hotel, everything was decorated a royal sea blue theme. The living room stretched in front of them and had 2 couches set up around a fireplace with a widescreen TV suspended on the ceiling just above the couches. The kitchen connected to the living room and was full size. Complete with stove, dishwasher, toaster oven and fridge. There was even a small dining area set up in the living room. In the very front of the room was a large glass window that stretched the entire length of that wall and had 2 glass double doors that lead out onto the well-sized balcony. There was a hallway to the right of the living room that lead to the large and very nice bathroom on the left side, and 2 large, extravagant rooms on the right side. The rooms themselves were very nice and sported a king-size bed each. The walls were painted a light sea blue and the room was decorated in the same royal sea theme as the rest of the hotel. Ash and Brock met back up with the girls in the boys' side living room, all of them looking equally as impressed and amazed with the rooms. This place is amazing. Giselle gushed happily. No kidding. The decor in the rooms is just unbelievable, and the jacuzzi. Misty trailed off with stars in her eyes. I really like the kitchens personally. Brock added in. Ash chuckled. I'm really not surprised, Brock. He chided his friend good-naturedly. I hope they have a good training center myself. He finished with a hopeful look. Ooh, me too. We could train every morning together just like usual, Ash. Giselle said as she wrapped her arm around his. Misty rolled her eyes. Train, train, train. That's all you two think about. She yelled exasperatedly as she threw her arms in the air. You corrupted her, Ash. She accused him with a pointed finger in his direction. Ash merely shrugged and smirked. What can I say, Mist? I'm a good influence. He bragged jokingly. Brock walked over to a table that was near the door and picked up a pamphlet that was resting on its surface. Hey guys, what do you say we go and check out the pool for a while? It's only 10 right now, which means we still have 2 hours before we have to meet the owner of the hotel. He then showed them one of the pages that was on the inside of the pamphlet he was holding and revealed a picture of the pool that was located out on the grounds. Sounds like a good idea to me. Ash agreed enthusiastically. The girls nodded their heads anxiously. Sounds like fun, Giselle said. Count me in as well. Misty chimed in. Pikachu called out his own excited yes, as Brock put the pamphlet down and headed back over to them. We better go get changed then, he recommended. The 4 friends then departed to their own rooms and changed into their swimwear before meeting back up in the hallway outside of the rooms. Ash locked his and Brock's door before turning back to his friends. Let's head out, guys. They took the elevator down to the lobby and waved to the nice desk clerk as they walked through the lobby. They walked all the way down to the end of it and then went through 2 large double doors that opened up into a large hallway. There were doors on either side of the long hallway that had signs posted above them telling what each room was for. Some of them were lounge rooms, others lead to the different indoor attractions of the hotel, and one even lead into the dining hall. They walked to the very end of the hallway and went through a door that was labeled, Grounds, in golden gilded letters. As they stepped outside, they were struck in awe by the beauty of the massive lawn before them. There were so many beautiful decorations, plants and flowers set up everywhere. It was truly a sight to behold. They walked down a path that led through the grounds and headed out towards the pool. The whole way there they just kept drinking in the sights around them. There were several other guests outside doing many different things. Some were just walking around taking in the sights and snapping pictures, while others were heading to the different outdoor activities set up. Apparently you could get to the beach from the grounds because there are many people dressed in beach clothes making their way towards the end of the grounds, where a guarded entry gate was set up with a sign that said, Beach, posted above the gate, with an arrow pointed in the direction of the beach. Ash whistled while they continued to walk. Being right near the beach and just on the outside of the city like this, I didn't think the hotel could possibly have an outdoors this big. I can't imagine how much it must have cost to build this place. Brock was thinking the same thing. I hear ya, Ash, it must have cost a fortune to build this place. Yeah, but can you imagine how much it actually must cost to stay here for real? Misty said from beside Giselle. We're staying here free because of the contest Ash won. For all 4 of us to stay here any other time for a whole week would have to cost thousands. Giselle added in. They would have to in order to make a profit off of this place. Ash agreed. I just can't believe they were allowed to build so close to the coral reefs that are right near here. Nothing else is built near this hotel, and they even have some type of construction going on out in the reefs. I can't believe they aren't bothering the Pokémon that I know have to live out there. He added as an afterthought. Maybe no Pokémon live in the section of the reef they're building on. Brock said. That would have to be the case, since I know that no city would never clear any kind of construction where Pokémon lived and had a habitat set up. At that moment the Horsey that Misty had cradled in her arms started going off like crazy and began struggling in Misty's grasp. All the while pointing out towards the coral reefs. Misty kept her hold on the Pokémon as he struggled. What's wrong, Horsey? She said as the Pokémon continued thrashing around. Horse. Horsey, Horsey. He called out wildly. Ash followed Horsey's gaze out to where he was looking and stared at the construction site for a while. Finally he spoke. I think Horsey knows something more about what's going on out there than we do. He said thoughtfully. Maybe he lives in those reefs and was chased away because of the construction going on. He guessed. Horsey looked at Ash expectantly when he said that and began speaking to the boy frantically. Horsey. Horse. Ash couldn't understand what Horsey was trying to say and just shook his head. It's hard to say, guys. Just keep watching him, alright, Misty? She nodded and held Horsey tighter and looked down at the Pokémon in her arms. It's all going to be alright now, Horsey. I won't let anything happen to you, okay? She assured. Horsey just sighed and looked down. Ash looked up at Pikachu. While we're all resting at the pool, do you think you could talk to Horsey and try to find out what's bothering him, pal? He asked his starter. Pikachu nodded. Pikachu, he said resolutely. Ash smiled and scratched his Pokémon behind the ears. Thanks, bud. The friends arrived at the gate to the pool a little while later and scanned their key cards before walking inside. The pool itself was very large and spacious. It went up to 12 feet deep and even had a low and high dive set up at the deepest end. There was also a rope in the middle of the pool that separated the shallow and deep ends for children and people who couldn't swim well. In one corner of the large pool area was a hot tub for people who wanted to just relax their tired muscles, a sunning area on the furthest end, and a small mini bar set up near the restroom changing area. For the better part of an hour and a half, Ash and his friends swam around the pool relaxingly. Ash and Brock eventually ended up taking turns jumping off of the high dive while Giselle and Misty floated around in the shallow end on some floating beds that the mini bar rented out, watching them. The pool staff was kind enough to allow Pikachu and Horsey into the water since they looked to be clean and well behaved, so Pikachu spent the entire time floating around on an inner tube trying to get Horsey to talk to him about what had him so on edge. Sadly, Horsey wouldn't open up. Ash and Brock had ended up having a contest of who could perform the best tricks off of the high dive. Brock had managed to execute a perfect backflip that he landed perfectly in the water, and with that he thought he had won. Those hopes were instantly dashed the moment Ash performed his own backflip. Double style, followed by a clockwise rotation in the air and finishing up by hitting the water in a perfect swam dive. Brock was left gaping while Misty and Giselle cheered loudly for Ash. After he had a moment to gloat his victory and Brock finished sulking, the friends packed up and headed back to the hotel so they could get ready to meet the owner. XXXXXXXX. 30 minutes later, we find Ash and his friend walking back down to the lobby after changing back into their regular clothes and freshening up from their fun in the pool. Ash had asked Pikachu in that time if he got anything out of Horsey and was upset to learn that Horsey didn't open up to him about anything. Ash thanked Pikachu for his effort and felt even more determined to find out what was bothering Horsey. If nothing more than for Misty's sake, since seeing the small Pokémon in such a state really worried Misty, who had grown to care for the water type. After arriving in the lobby and greeting the desk clerk, he thanked them again for their cooperation and called over another employee to lead the kids up to the owner's private office. Ash and his friends followed the employee into the elevator and watched as he lifted up a hidden panel directly below the main floor selection pad and revealed a small keyhole. The employee reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key. He stuck it into the keyhole, and after turning it, another small panel directly next to the keyhole was revealed. A single small button that had the number 13 feet on it, representing a 13th floor, was the only thing on the small pad. The employee pressed the button and then Ash and his friends were nearly thrown off balance when the elevator suddenly lurched and instead of moving up, moved towards the right a little bit and then started to go up. After he regained his balance, Ash asked, "Why did the elevator move sideways?" The employee looked back at them and answered, "Another shaft was built right next to the main shaft and was built to take the elevator all the way up to the 13th floor. Which is mostly where the owner's office, the vault and all of the most important records for the hotel is kept. It's completely sealed off from the rest of the hotel so that none of the guests would accidentally walk into an area they're not supposed to. A small track built below the elevator is what connects the main shaft to the one we are in now." Ash and his friends looked amazed at the revelation of a completely separate portion of the hotel being blocked off from the rest of it, but definitely understood the reasoning for such a thing. The elevator finally stopped at its destination and the doors opened up, revealing a long hallway. The walls were made of some kind of beechwood, the floors were tile and the ceiling was also made of beechwood. The employee stepped out of the elevator and proceeded down the hallway with Ash and his friends in tow. They passed a few doors on the way that looked like they led into storage rooms full of filing cabinets and one door in particular that was heavily locked and secured. Most likely leading to the safe room. They reached their destination, which was a solid oak door, and then the employee knocked on the door. After hearing no response on the other side, he looked back at Ash and his friends. The owner must not be in yet, but I'll let you in and you can just wait for her. Ash nodded his head in understanding and then stepped inside of the room after the employee unlocked the door, flanked by his friends. They found themselves in a very spacious, large office that was very professional and business looking. All except for one of the walls in the back corner of the office. The entire wall had been hollowed out and made into a huge aquarium that had a few Goldeen, Seeking and Magikarp swimming around inside of it. There was also a big window behind the large desk sitting at the front of the office that had a perfect view of the ocean and more specifically, the coral reefs, far below. The employee pointed out some lounge chairs in one corner of the office and said, "You can wait right over there if you want to, and also feel free to help yourself to the water and fruit over there at the table." He pointed towards the refreshments. "I'm sure she will be here at any moment. Do you need anything else by chance?" he asked nicely. Ash looked at his friends and they shook their heads. He looked back at the man. "No thank you sir, we're good, and thank you for bringing us up here," Ash said gratefully. The employee smiled and bowed his head. "Very good then. Have a great day, and it was my pleasure." He then backed out of the room and shut the door behind him. Ash went over and looked out the large window at the ocean far below him. The others took seats on the lounge chairs and Giselle started eating on one of the peaches she took from the snack table. "So what do you think this owner wants?" Misty asked curiously. Ash turned around and shook his head. "The desk clerk said she just wanted to welcome us here, but I guess we won't really know until she gets here." Ash went over and took a seat beside Giselle and looked at her amusedly as she ate away at her peach. She looked over at him in mid-bite and suddenly got nervous. She fidgeted around little as she bit down again, and finally she couldn't take it anymore. What am I doing that is so amusing?" she asked in frustration. Ash chuckled and pointed at her chin. "You must just really like fruit, or at least peaches, Giselle. It's all over your chin." He started laughing a little and Giselle turned bright red as she rubbed at her chin and felt all of the juices that were collected there. Ash continued chuckling as he handed her a napkin that was on a table near the chairs they were sitting on. She took it and wiped her face as she glared at Ash. "You just stop it, mister. Everyone gets messy sometimes, and I happen to just like fruit, especially peaches, quite a lot," she defended herself. Ash finally regained his breath and said,